Hello, everyone, and welcome back to A God Shift. I am your host, Shayna Rattler. I'm so glad that you're here today. But before we get started, I would love if you would do me a favor. So, wherever it is that you're listening to this episode, I just want you to take a screenshot. And with the screenshot, I would love if you would post it on your social media, tag us here at A God Shift. And then I just want to hear your biggest aha moment or your biggest takeaway from this episode. And the reason why I ask you to do that is because I know that there are so many believers out there that really want to do their part to uphold and protect Christian values. And a lot of people just don't know where to start. And so the more times that these episodes are shared, the more people that we can employ with the topics and the strategies that we discuss on the show. So I greatly appreciate that. I am going to read my guest bio and we're going to get to it. So, my guest today is the Vice President and Director of Medical Affairs for Charlotte Lozier Institute, leveraging more than 25 years' experiences as a practicing obstetrician gynecologist to support research and policies that respect the dignity of every human life. She received her Bachelor's of Science in Physiology from Oklahoma State University and her medical doctorate from Washington University School of Medicine. She completed her residency in obstetrics and gynecology at the University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio. She is a fellow of the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, where she uses science and statistics to counter pro-abortion agendas, and is a lifetime member of the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists. Prior to joining Charlotte Lozier Institute, she served for over 25 years in private practice in San Antonio, where she delivered more than 5,000 babies and personally cared for many women who had been harmed physically and emotionally from complications due to abortion. She has served as board member and medical director for pregnancy resource centers in San Antonio, Austin, and Houston. Her research on maternal mortality, abortion, and women's health has been published in multiple peer-reviewed journals. I can't talk today. Additionally, she has provided expert testimony at both the state and federal levels on legislation related to abortion, including standing firm against prominent pro-abortion politicians who choose not to follow the science regarding fetal heartbeat and development. So I am excited to welcome to the show Dr. Ingrid Skop.
Thanks, Shayna. I'm so happy to be with you today.
Yes, I'm excited to have you here for what some people are going to say is a very controversial subject. Everybody thinks that everything I talk about is so controversial, and I only jokingly say that because it just makes me laugh when people say "my body, my choice." In some regards, I kind of agree with that, but as a Christian, I don't agree with that when it comes to abortion. So I think it would be a good idea, Dr. Skop, if we would just at the beginning, if you would just talk a little bit about. So again, I said at the beginning of the show, this show is all about how we can protect and uphold our Christian values that we cherish so much. And so I would love if you would just kind of lay the foundation for what is the pro-life movement and why should we make sure we understand that as Christians who really want to protect these values.
I think that's a great question because the issue of abortion, I'll admit, is very uncomfortable. And if you're not directly addressing it or involved, there are many, many passionate Christians in the pro-life movement who feel this to be the preeminent spiritual issue of our time. And I agree, as we'll discuss, but I understand for the average Christian, it's something they just really don't want to think about. But at its root, it is a spiritual issue, but it's also a human rights issue, and it's also a scientific issue. The unborn human, from the moment of fertilization, has his own unique genetic makeup. He is not the same as his mother, although he is safely situated within her body. And of course, she does need to help him to grow and to develop by providing nutrients. But he is an independent human being. And so at its root, we in our country, we have over 1 million abortions every year, and more than 95% of those are performed for social and financial reasons. So it's something that we really need to address. Is that who we are? Do we end human life for reasons such as those? The good news is those passionate pro-life Americans also support over almost 3,000 pregnancy resource centers whose goal is to walk alongside women when they're in the potential crisis of an unintended pregnancy, to give them support to help them give birth to their children.
Mm. So I'm curious. I hear people say oftentimes, like, so you're telling me that if a woman is raped by a stranger, that she should be forced to have this child. I read somewhere, and I would love for you to confirm or deny it if you're able to do so, that when we look at the number of abortion cases that happen in this country, that those that occur because someone has been raped are actually a small percentage of the overall number of women who are having abortions. Is that true?
It is true. The best number that we have, and we'll probably discuss that abortion data is very, very incomplete in the United States. We really don't try very hard to find really accurate data. But the number is about 3 out of 1,000. And of
Wow.
course, this is a heartbreaking situation. Everybody, regardless of how they feel about abortion, their heart goes out to a woman who becomes pregnant as a result of sexual violence. And yet, just as we see the issue cloaked in euphemisms, we see abortion advocates pointing at this tragic situation, but their goal is to overturn all of our laws protecting unborn life so that they can also perform abortions in the 997 out of 1,000 that are not the result of rape. And so, really, in order to have a conversation, we need to go back to the beginning. This is a human life. And then we need to take it from there and say, in what situations do we end a human life? And regarding the tragic issue of sexual violence, how do we stop that? How do we, go back and address the upstream determinants that lead to such violence being done against women? So it's very complex. Obviously, we're not going to be able to solve a problem like a rape-related pregnancy with a one-sentence soundbite,
Yeah.
but we really need to dig into it and to address the reality that this is a human being, and then address the reality about what is best for his mother, instead of making an assumption about what we think is best for her.
Yeah, that's good. So you said that in the United States, the data is not as comprehensive as it could be, but you also mentioned that some of the primary reasons that a woman has an abortion is because of financial reasons. And what was the other reason you said?
Well, social indications. And I think many, many times what we recognize is it's because the man who is the father of this child, in many cases, does not want to fulfill his responsibility as a father. So women, and I've seen this many, many times in my career, many times they would like to give birth to their child. I mean, a woman is hormonally primed by our creator to bond with her child. So many times, even if the situation is not optimal, maybe the finances are limited, deep down, so many of these women want their baby. And yet when the man in their life says, let's have an abortion, or too many men have been told they can't have a voice. And I think many of these men would be willing to support the woman, and yet they stand back and they say, well, it's your body, it's your choice, you make the choice. And so many women feel pressure to have an abortion. We recently published several studies that were very insightful. Over 60% of women had a high degree of pressure to have an abortion, but also 60% of women said that they would have given birth if they'd only had more support.
Wow.
So, many women, even if the situation is rough and they think this was the right thing, that doesn't keep them from experiencing regret and experiencing mental health complications. We know, looking at good quality studies in European countries, that a woman is 6 times as likely to commit suicide in the year following an abortion than if she had given birth. So these are all things we need to be discussing. Is an abortion, it certainly doesn't reset the clock and negate the living human being. All it does is offer an inadequate solution to a crisis in a woman's life. And we can do so much better for women than to offer them the choice to end their children's lives in a response to their crises.
That's such great data. So when I was doing my research for this show and I was thinking about what I wanted these conversations to consist of, I found something that talked about a lawsuit against the FDA. Can you discuss that lawsuit?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a very important topic. The FDA in the year 2000, under political pressure, broke their own rules on a number of occasions in order to approve an abortion drug regimen, two drugs, mifepristone and misoprostol. Mifepristone, also known as Mifeprex or RU486, may be familiar to some. That's its name in France, cuts off the hormonal support. It ends the embryonic life. And then it's followed by misoprostol about 24 to 48 hours later, which induces contractions to expel the pregnancy tissue. So this is the so-called medication or chemical abortion.
Okay.
Um, and it's very distressing for women. So we know from good studies there are 4 times as many complications after a chemical abortion compared to a surgical abortion. These women essentially go into labor, bleed for an average of 2 weeks. Some will bleed for longer than a month. And 40% describe the pain as severe because it's labor. And also, many of these women see their child that they've chosen to abort. So
Hmm.
that's the background on this, the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine lawsuit. Over time, the FDA, again for political reasons, has removed many of the safeguards regulating these drugs. Initially, they said it had to be a doctor to prescribe it because we know about 1 out of 20 women will fail to evacuate all the tissues. So there needed to be a relationship. If it failed, they needed to have a surgeon that could help them and could resolve and get the tissue out of there. It was only used up to 7 weeks. Complication reporting was mandatory, but we discover retrospectively that many, many times the abortion industry ignored the mandatory reporting complication. In 2016, it was extended up to 10 weeks despite higher failure rates. No longer did it need to be a physician. No longer were complications needed to be reported unless they killed a woman.
Wow.
So, very inappropriate what the FDA did. But then, unfortunately, in 2021, using the COVID pandemic as an excuse, the FDA permanently removed all of the in-person supervision. What that means is initially they said this is so women could get it by telemedicine, but in actuality, people can now order it over the internet. So it can be delivered through the mail, in many cases illegally, because there are quite a few states that prohibit that and are trying to protect unborn life. No ultrasound is done. So the woman is asked to estimate her gestational age. She may be wrong. She may be much further along than she thinks. No one is ruling out an ectopic pregnancy, a pregnancy in the tube, which these drugs do not treat. So this can result in a deadly tubal rupture, and women have died from this. No one is doing labs to determine if a woman needs RhoGAM, perhaps, to prevent future pregnancy complications. And importantly, no one is even documenting that the person ordering the drugs is a woman who wants an abortion. Does she know there's resources to support her? Or is it even a man who wants his girlfriend, or is it a sex trafficker? Is it
Yeah.
someone ordering the drugs, providing them to women, causing unwanted abortions? So the FDA has allowed all of that to happen. This lawsuit, the Alliance for Hippocratic Medicine, is 5 organizations who, as our name implies, we want to practice Hippocratic medicine. We do not want to kill one of our patients. And we also are asking that the FDA be held accountable. Their job is to protect the American public from dangerous drugs. And I think it's very clear with this brief overview, they're not doing that. These drugs are all over the place. They are hurting women. I practice in Texas. We, of course, have been protecting unborn life for about 2.5 years, and I am still caring for women in my emergency room who've gone out of state and gotten these drugs, or perhaps gotten them through the mail, and are having complications. And there's no doctor, they have no relationship with anybody to help them until they come to my emergency room. So that's what this lawsuit is about. And although it's been painted as this is pro-life people trying to, strong arm the FDA. No, at its root, the FDA needs to do its job. And so I think even pro-choice people should be able to recognize that this is inappropriate, the way that these drugs are being given to women.
So I feel like the $1 million question that is ringing in my head right now, and I imagine that many of the listeners are thinking as well. I'll first speak for myself. I do believe that a lot of the problems that we're seeing in the world today that all fall under the category of like this rising trend of opposition to God, I believe that there's a strong agenda behind a lot of these topics. And so I'm just curious of the why. Like, why are they trying to push so much confusion? Why are they trying to, what is the real intent and what is the real agenda that an organization that is designed to protect us is actually knowingly doing things that is going to harm us?
That's such a deep question, Shayna. I think at some level, we see from the writings of some of the people who promote abortion, there are eugenic motivations. Many times there are particular, maybe a young woman or a minority that they may think, we don't really think that woman needs to have a baby, very paternalistic, deciding who should have babies and who shouldn't, population control. At the time when our total fertility rate is not at replacement, we are not having enough children to replace ourselves, and yet we continue to see population control ideology. We need less people. People are carbon emitters and are bad. But at its root, it's spiritual. I think we can all recognize that. The Bible is very clear about God's tender affection for the unborn. Psalms 139 tells us that he lovingly crafted us together in our mother's womb. Jeremiah and Isaiah tell us that he called them to their mission before they were born. Luke tells us that the unborn John the Baptist leaped for joy in the presence of the unborn Jesus. And yet, sadly, a recent survey documented that 44% of American Christians thought the Bible was ambiguous about abortion. So unfortunately, in the church, we have a problem. Number one, many people in the church don't know what the Bible says. Number
Yes.
two, pastors are many times will not address this issue from the pulpit. They're afraid. They're afraid. I can't say what's in their minds, but maybe they think they'll be found judgmental. Maybe they think they'll put their tax exempt status at risk. And yet we know that over half of the women who obtain abortions are women who identify as Christians. We
Wow.
know that 16% of regular churchgoers, those who are in the pews week after week, report an abortion in their history. So we know that this affects people. We know that there is much guilt, much regret. And until the church addresses it, some of these Christians have not been able to achieve forgiveness. They've not been able to resolve this with their God. They've hidden it down deeply. And also, the public um, the public's what they understand about abortion is very flawed, of course, because the media paint a very rosy picture, and the church needs to address this. I think that we're really not going to be able to make inroads. We're not going to be able to help people to really understand how harmful this is, not just for the unborn children, but for their mothers
Yeah.
and for their families, for society in general. The breakdown of the family that has gone along with promiscuous sexuality and ready access to abortion is widely documented. Prior to Roe, 11% of women giving birth were unmarried. Today, it is 40%. In some ethnic populations, it's as high as 70%.
Wow.
So many women who deep down want their children either are coerced into an abortion or they have a child and raise that child as a single mother because the man is not willing to step up to his responsibility of a father. And so the church, if the church can't take leadership on this issue, I don't know what the church should be doing, because it's inherently a very, very important spiritual issue.
I absolutely agree. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, Dr. Scott, we're going to talk about some of the next steps that we can begin to take. We'll be right back. God is commissioning women leaders to uphold Christian values and change the course of history for his glory, and to mobilize other women to blaze the same trail. Want to know what type of kingdom leader you are and learn specific strategies to impact change based on your type? Find out by going to kingdomtrailblazerquiz.com right now. All right. So we're having this discussion about the pro-life movement and as Christians, why we should care and why this is happening and what the church should do about it. So I would love for one of the things that I always want to make sure happens during my podcast episodes is that if we have someone that is either has a desire to uphold Christian values themselves, or they want to impress upon other people to do the same, that they're really equipped with how they can do that. So how does someone, number one, get more involved in the pro-life movement? And then number two, what would be something that you would tell them that would make it easy for them to begin to have this conversation with people that, so that they can see, especially if it's someone that believes in God but believes they should do this? Well, I know that's two completely different questions, but just give us some tips, give us some steps, Dr. Skop.
Yeah, no, I think, these are two very important questions. First and foremost, a lot of people don't talk about the issue because they feel like they don't really understand it. And I think we can see that because Google's not pro-life. Even if you wanted to go find out about abortion, many times it'll direct you to abortion advocacy organizations. At lozierinstitute.org, we have a lot of very good scientific information. We look at the peer-reviewed literature. In many cases, we publish peer-reviewed literature. And so we have deep dives, we have fact sheets. So there's a lot of information to be had. So just understand, what are we really talking about? Secondarily, on the ground, every city has a pregnancy resource center, at least one. I believe in San Antonio, there's probably 8 to 12. And these are organizations on the ground that want to support women who are in these crises. They always need financial support, but in many cases, they're staffed by volunteers. So find out where your local pregnancy resource center is and get involved. It's beautiful, really, what happens on the ground. Because again, women, many times, the decision for an abortion is a knee-jerk reflex. About half of the pregnancies in our country are unintended. So unintended pregnancies are not necessarily a crisis, they're just a surprise. And so if someone comes alongside that woman and gives her the courage to know that she is strong enough to give birth to her child, they offer emotional support, material support, many times relationship support. Let's bring that father in and help to empower him, to encourage him that he is strong enough to be a father, that he is strong enough to be a husband to the woman that he loves. And so those are absolutely critical things. We've published a recent study of the 3,000 pregnancy resource centers in our country, nearly 1 million new visits every year, $350 million in resources. So these organizations are doing incredible work. And statistically, when a woman walks into one of those organizations, she has an overwhelming chance of continue to carry her pregnancy and give birth to her child. And even when she gives birth, the support doesn't end there. So they want to help these women become good mothers and take good care of their children. So it's a beautiful thing. And I would encourage everyone to find out what their local center is and to get involved.
That's great information. I feel like, you're right. There is a lot of confusion out there. There is a lot of lack of understanding, and most people are not going to be willing to share information that they don't feel that they can adequately discuss or defend. And so I think you've done a really great job of kind of laying the foundation. So if someone wants to kind of go further with this, is there a place that they can go on social media?
So Lozier Institute has a Twitter account. I have a Twitter account. My handle is Doc Skop. And also another organization that I would recommend for good information is the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists. So there is good information available. But again, it's not going to come to the viewer passively. People have to seek it out. They have to make a commitment to understand the issue, and then they can begin to have discussions with their friends. And again, sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes people resist even discussing it. But if we can't discuss it, how are we going to make an impact on it? I would also, mention that there's so much misinformation in our country today. As the states have been able to pass pro-life laws, there has been an attempt to fearmonger. You've probably seen the headlines that states that protect unborn life can't provide adequate care to women, that women will die, that maternal mortality will increase. And this is, of course, a lie. Every state that protects unborn life will allow an abortion if it's needed to save a mother's life. But I can tell you, after 30 years of practice, I've never had to do it. So it's extremely rare, and yet the law allows it if it's needed. We've got to combat these lies, because the intent is to frighten the American public so much that they oppose the laws and overturn the laws that are protecting unborn children.
Such great information. I knew this was going to be awesome. It did not disappoint. So thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Scott. Everyone, share this episode far and wide. I pray that it has blessed you the way that it has blessed me, and that you will go back and listen to previous and future episodes as well. Everyone, have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.